The Santa slaying was a massacre that took place on Christmas morning of 2011. The gunman dressed head to toe in a Santa Claus costume and set out to murder 6 members of the same family. So today's video is going to be another solved true crime case. Today we're going to be talking about the Grapevine Massacre. That's kind of the official name of this crime, but because of, well, I've already told you, the killer was dressed as Santa. Because of that, this case has been given a lot of Christmassy nicknames, and I thought, with this being the last video that I'm going to upload before Christmas, let's do one. Let's talk about one, shall we? So yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Grapevine Massacre. But quickly, before we get into the case, I do just want to thank our sponsors for making this video possible, Magellan TV. Magellan TV is such a hidden gem when it comes to streaming services. If you haven't heard of it, let me put you on. So it's a documentary streaming service with the biggest and best true crime selection I've ever found. There's so much content to explore on there, from like serial killer documentaries, all the big famous ones, and like missing persons cases, and there's also documentaries that are from like the detective's point of view. I love those ones. There's even like documentaries on cults and ones inside the prisons, you know, once the criminals have already been captured. There's absolutely everything on there. And a really good one that I watched recently was called The Samurai Killer, and it's quite a short one, only 20-something minutes if you're looking for a shorter one, but it is one of the most fascinating cases I've ever heard of, and I'd never heard of it before Magellan TV. So basically in 2008, this kid went into his high school with a katana sword and just started attacking people. He was like slashing people. He was supposedly a Satanist. He like wore a mask to carry it all out. The mask was like inspired by Slipknot. He was a really big Slipknot fan. There were a lot of really fascinating elements to this case, so I really recommend watching that one. Magellan TV just has some really good finds on there, especially if you're a true crime junkie and you've seen a lot of cases. They will definitely have something that you've never come across before. Which brings me to my next point, actually. If you have true crime junkies in your life, I think Magellan TV is the perfect Christmas present because they always have gift cards available to buy. So I think that's just a great, it's such a unique Christmas present, and I think they'll get a lot of use out of it, like especially curling up on the sofa in the winter months to watch a true crime documentary. I'd be doing that every day. And Magellan TV are very kindly offering you guys 1 month free when you sign up using my link. It's down below in the description of this video. You can click it and it'll take you right there. Thanks again to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Now, before we get into it, I do just want to give my usual disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anyone that I talk about in this video. This video is for educational purposes, and everything that I'm about to say is just information that I have found on the internet and I'm compiling into one video. Quickly, before we get into the case, I do have one content warning. I'm sorry if I've missed any others, but we will be talking about a case of suicide in this case. So I'm sorry if I have missed any others. That's the only one I picked up on. But yeah, if that's something that you don't want to hear about right now, please click out the video, look after yourself. Merry Christmas. Hopefully I'll get to see you again some other time with a different case that's a bit more suitable for you. But with all that being said, let's get into the case. So today's case takes place on Christmas morning of 2011 in Grapevine in Texas. Just after 11 a.m, police responders received a phone call. So, you know, 911 received a phone call, and at first it just seemed silent. The operator was saying, hello, is anyone there? Can I help you? They heard a little bit of like muffled noise, and then towards the end, they thought they heard a whisper, and then the line cut off after like 20 seconds. This whole call was only about 20 seconds long, and then the line went dead. And this operator comes off the phone and they're like, that was weird. That is a concerning phone call to receive, isn't it? As a 911 operator, just a load of muffled noise and then the line goes dead. No one says anything. They thought they heard a whisper. There's a person there trying to communicate. And so this operator thinks, shit, we need to check on this person, make sure they're okay. So they managed to get up the location of where this call was made from. It was just like a residential apartment building, I think, in Grapevine in Texas. And so this operator gets in touch with the police, like actual responders, and says, look, I've had this really like concerning call. I just want you to go down to this address and make sure that this person is okay. Can you perform a welfare check? So police go down to the address, they knock on the door, and no one comes to open it. And so they're knocking again, they're shouting, you know, it's the police, can you let us in? no one's coming. And they put their ear to the door and there's no movement inside either. They can't hear anyone like hiding or anything. And because police had been sent there on a welfare check, I don't know exactly what the rules are in Texas, but I know that here in the UK, if police are sent on a welfare check, they're not allowed to leave the location that they've been sent to until they have seen and spoken to the person that the welfare check has been called on and assessed that that person is okay. You know, like here in the UK, they will not leave until they've seen and spoken to the person that they need to make sure is all right. And I think that's probably the same thing there. They knew they needed to get into that apartment to go and make sure that the residents were safe. But the only thing that they could do was kick the door down. So they did it. They kicked this door down, they ran inside the apartment, and they found the most horrifying scene. Inside the house, surrounded by presents and torn up wrapping paper, were the dead bodies of 7 people. They'd all been shot to death. Immediately from walking into this room, it seemed as though Christmas morning had started as normal for this family. I mean, they'd all come and sat down in the living room and been opening presents. Presents were like half unwrapped at this point. They were midway through opening their presents. But someone, for some reason, had brutally massacred them all. 7 people. This was huge. And this was a very, like, small neighborhood as well. I think Grapevine as a city is quite big, but this, like, little neighborhood was quite a, like, close-knit, friendly one where they lived. This kind of thing did not happen. Murders did not happen. Never mind 7-person shooting massacres on Christmas Day of all days. So the first thought is, oh my god, this family have been murdered. Who could have done this and why? Why would they want to do this? But as police are kind of getting a sense of the crime scene, they're noticing that there's no signs of forced entry into the home at all. There's no smashed windows. I mean, they had to kick the door down themselves to be able to get in. The door was locked. So it didn't seem as though anyone had broken in to murder this whole family. It didn't seem as though anyone had come or gone at all. And this was confirmed when police noticed 2 guns laying on the floor between the deceased, and it seemed that 2 of them were holding the guns or had been holding the guns when they died. The 2 people holding the guns were the 2 older men in the family. One of them was dressed head to toe in a Santa costume. So, crime scene investigations were launched there at the house. Meanwhile, police back at the station were getting to work trying to identify who their victims were. So they put in the location, the address in their, like, police database system. I don't know how they do it, but they've got that way where they can put in an address and they'll be able to find out who owns it. And they did. It belonged to a 55-year-old woman named Aziz Yazdanpanah. And when the bodies were actually removed from the house and taken to a morgue for identification, Aziz was found to have been one of the deceased. And the rest of them were all her family. This had been police's theory, to be fair, given the circumstances that they'd all been found murdered in their living room on Christmas morning. They were all together. Christmas is a time that we do spend with our families, so the immediate theory was that this was a whole family that had been massacred, but the identifications just proved that. The man that was dressed as Santa was identified as Nazrin's husband, 56-year-old Aziz Yazdanpanah, and 2 of the other victims were their 2 children together. They had a girl and a boy named Nona and Ali. Nona was 19 and Ali was 15. He was the youngest of the victims that day. And the other 3 victims were Nazrin's side of the family. So her sister Zori, who was 58, and her husband Hussein, who was 59. And then there was their 22-year-old daughter named Sarah. So it was all Nazrin's family and her sister's side of the family. All of them had been shot to death. Some of them multiple times. We'll get into that more in a second, but they had no other injuries on them. So it was immediately clear to police that this had just been a straight up massacre. This wasn't like a prolonged like physical assault. There didn't seem to be any altercation there at all. There was not much of a struggle in the house. Someone had literally just walked in and just shot them all. All of the kids and their auntie Zori had all been shot in the head multiple times. Zori's husband Hussein had been shot the most out of everyone in the family, and he'd been shot in like quite a few different places, which led police to theorize that he was either trying to run away from the attacker or maybe try to protect his family. But basically he was moving as he was being shot multiple times by his attacker. They know this because he had like one in his chest, one in his shoulder, one in his back, as if he was like turning away from them, and they just kept shooting and hitting him wherever. But something really interesting that they found in the autopsy was that these gunshot wounds on Hussein, and only on Hussein, had been done with 2 different guns. All the other victims had only been shot with one particular type of gun. No matter how many gunshot wounds they had, they were all done by the same gun. Hussein had been shot more than anyone else and with 2 different guns. I find this personally really interesting. It's as if the killer shot him a few times, decided that was it, put the gun down, and then changed his mind and went to go and pick up another one and carried on. I wonder what the thought process was there. Unless Hussein hadn't died from the first few gunshots, potentially, and then the killer went back over with the other gun in their hand and just finished it off. But one thing that was kind of throwing police off at this point in time, I know it was very early on in the investigation, but one thing that seemed quite odd was that those 2 guns that they found the 2 murder weapons just laying on the floor in the living room, and like I said, they were in the men's hands. One of them was in Hussein's hand, and the other one was in Aziz's hand, as he was dressed as Santa. There was a Santa with a gun on the floor. Oh, I forgot to say that Nazrin and Aziz, Santa and his wife, both only sustained 1 gunshot wound to the head each. They had the least amount of injuries out of everyone. So news broke that exact same day. So like all families were waking up in the area, switching on the news, switching on the radio, and hearing about this poor family that had been completely massacred on Christmas morning. And people in the area were so shocked because not only is this a horrifically brutal crime, but this had happened in such a safe place. Like I said, that neighborhood was very tight-knit, and they really didn't have much crime there at all. Not even like burglaries, home invasions, robberies, theft. Like, they were very few and far between. To have a 7-person massacre was unheard of. And neighbours were also terrified because, well, there's a shooter on the loose. There is a murderer at large on Christmas Day. Who knows, like, where they could go next, what family they could massacre next. People were locking their doors, people weren't going out. Police quietly worked on this case all the way through Christmas Day, which I find really mad, by the way. That, like, every aspect of this case is so insane. Imagine getting that call as a policeman who is having to work Christmas Day. You're a bit annoyed that you've been put on shift on Christmas morning. You get this call to go to this house. So you get there and you find 7 dead bodies. And then they have to go back to the police station and get to work trying to solve the murder of this whole family on Christmas Day, knowing that, like, their wife and kids are at home, unwrapping presents without them. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, like, spin it as if, like, police are victims in this. Of course, this case is about this family, but I also just find that aspect of it also so heartbreaking. I imagine it's really quite traumatizing to work on a case like this, to walk into that you know? Anyway, police worked on this case all the way through Christmas Day and into the early hours of Boxing Day, and finally, on the morning of the 26th of December, they announced to the public that they weren't actually looking for a shooter. They weren't looking for a gunman. From searches of the crime scene and evidence analysis, police believed they had already identified their killer, but he was no longer a danger. So they'd taken this 911 call as part of their investigation because they wanted to know what had actually happened on that 911 call that made them suspicious enough to send police out in the first place. They wanted to know especially what that whisper said at the end. They thought they'd heard a whisper. So they took this call, slowed it down, did all these like audio enhancing techniques, and they heard something. They actually determined that there were 2 different voices in this phone call. What sounded like muffled noise was actually a person. It was someone like more so in the background. This was a lot quieter, a lot more faint, but this person seemed to be saying, "Help, help me." And then the whisper that came just after that was the caller saying, "I'm shooting people." And then they hung up the phone. So police had the shooter's own voice in this call, but because it was so like heavily enhanced and slowed, they really couldn't make out anything characteristic about this voice other than the fact that it was an older man. I mean, they could just tell from like the bassiness and the deep low, you know, man voice. He had man voice, which was interesting because remember which two members of the family were holding guns when their bodies were found? The two men, Hussein and Aziz. So next, police start doing some ballistic tests, like actual like gun tests, looking at the actual bullets and the wounds and the directory of everything. They do gunshot residue tests on all of the victims, hands mostly, but like on all of the victims, because they were all gonna have some level of gunshot residue on them. It comes off when a gun fires and it'll literally go on like everyone in the room pretty much. But the closer you are to the gun, the more gunshot residue you get on you. So they're thinking the killer is going to be absolutely covered, their hands are going to be covered, whereas all the victims are going to have significantly less. And the body that was found to have the most gunshot residue all over them was Aziz Yazdanpanah, the Santa of the group. He had it all over his hands, all down his Santa costume. But Hussein, on the other hand, didn't seem to have that much on him. Not enough to be a shooter anyway. He seemed to have like a victim amount of gunshot residue on them, a very similar amount to all the women. And this is when things started making sense to police. Because, of course, by this point, they'd collected both guns from the crime scene, taken them for testing, believing that they were the murder weapons. But one of them, the one that Hussein was holding, seemed to have no prints on it at all. It looked like it had been wiped. And this doesn't really happen. Like, there's not many chances where you could actually use a gun with your hand and not leave prints on it. Like, even if you put your sleeve over your hand, you know, the only other way that this could have happened is if he was wearing gloves, and he wasn't wearing gloves when they found him. So it had definitely been wiped. So now it's looking as if Hussein was framed. Maybe someone else had used that gun, wiped their prints off, then killed Hussein and laid the gun in his hands to make him look as though he was the killer. The gun that Hussein was holding was a 9mm pistol, and police managed to like run the serial number on the system, and they found that it was registered to Aziz Yazdanpanah. He'd owned it for almost a decade. So why was it found wiped in Hussein's hands? Does this mean that Aziz had tried to frame his own brother-in-law for the massacre of their whole family? That seems like the only explanation. Someone must have been alive after Hussein was already killed, who would have been able to then wipe that gun and place it in his hands. Maybe that was when Aziz took his own life, shot himself, and then that's why he too was found with a gun in his hand. That's why they were both found with them. So now police think they know what's gone on here, that this man has massacred his whole family on Christmas, but why? What on earth was his motive here? What was going on in that family to spark this? So police start doing some research of the Yazdanpanah family in general, but specifically more so Aziz. They found that he used to be a real estate agent, but had actually been unemployed for over a decade before this case. He seemed to have done a real character arc in the last like 10 years. Before that, when he was a real estate agent and when him and Nazrin had first gotten married, he seemed like a very nice, normal, cool guy, you know. They had their daughter, then they had their son. They were just a very happy family, seemingly. Nazrin was a stay-at-home mother. That's just kind of how their families were. They were very old-fashioned, very traditional. They'd been raised that way, Nazrin and Aziz, in very traditional old-fashioned households, and so that was how their household was going to be, but they were both, you know, consensual in that. It was like that's how they both wanted to run their ship. And so she was a stay-at-home mother. She cooked, cleaned, looked after the kids while Aziz went out to work as a real estate agent. But after a few years of this, the family got into some really bad financial hardship, actually, and it was all Aziz's fault. He had filed a fraudulent tax report. He got done for fraud, and he was found guilty and ordered not only to pay a fine, but to pay all of it back that he'd owed. So the fine was $1,000, which it was a bit of a wound at the best of times. But then he was ordered to pay back $30,000 in installments. These regular installments were taking up a lot of the family's wage, and they couldn't afford more than the bare necessities at this point in time. They were only just affording like food, but they couldn't do anything else because their dad was paying back all this money. It was quite a miserable existence. None of them were happy. They were struggling. And so Nazrin went to her husband and she said that she was thinking about getting a job. Now, as soon as Aziz heard this, he hit the roof. He was offended that his wife said that she wanted to go and get a job because he was supposed to be the man of the house. He was supposed to be the breadwinner, the money earner. He was the one that had the job. She was the one that stayed home. But this must have been a kick to his ego because he's now realising that he's not doing a good enough job. He's an inadequate dad, an inadequate husband, and now his wife wants to do the man jobs. That's how it is in his eyes anyway. And he's offended. He says, no, you're not getting a job. So the family go on struggling for a little while until they literally can't anymore. And Nazrin just had to go out and get jobs. Like, whether her husband was happy with it or not, they needed money to live. They were really, really struggling. They were almost not eating meals at this point. So Nazrin goes out and gets 2 different jobs at 2 different spas. So in the Yazdanpanah household at this point in time, there is a lot of tension. There's a lot of resentment because that's another way that this family went about things. They weren't vocal. They didn't argue. They didn't communicate things. Especially the kids, actually, this is how the kids and his wife were with Aziz. But if Aziz had a problem, he could voice it. He could be vocal about it. He could argue. But they were never allowed to express that to him. And so there was a lot of just resentment towards Aziz in the household. I don't know if he realised, don't know if he could sense it, but the kids didn't like him and his wife's starting to not like him. So there's a lot of tension, and that tension only gets worse now that Nazrin's got 2 jobs because the roles have kind of switched. He feels emasculated because he's not the one providing. He's now a house husband. He is taking care of the kids and cleaning the house and cooking the meals, and he hates it. He absolutely hates it that his wife is out being the breadwinner. Things went on like this for a little while, but Nazrin's 2 jobs were just not enough, and eventually the family had to file for bankruptcy. And at this point, the tension got even worse. Because the worse this situation got, the worse their financial situation got, the more they all blamed Aziz, obviously because it is his fault, but the more they all hated him for having put them through this. Like, they're having to starve because he didn't want to pay his taxes like 10 years ago. They're all so mad at him, but on the inside, they can never really like vocalize this. And every so often, the older of their 2 daughters, Nona, would let something slip to her school friends. So she wasn't much of a talker. I mean, there's a big thing about like pride in families like this where you can't shame the family, you can't bitch about your family, you can't, don't be going out and telling our business and our drama. But Nona would let a couple of things slip every now and again to her school friends. I don't know exactly what she would say. I really couldn't find any examples, but her friends just remember hearing it and being like, that shouldn't be happening. Like, they would tell her, like, my dad isn't like that with me. Like, is everything okay? Like, your dad shouldn't be like that with you. I think he was just a very angry, controlling man. I don't know if it ever passed into physical abuse. So yeah, Nona would like let these little things slip to her school friends and they'd be like, I don't think that's right. I don't think that should be happening. And then Nona would get like almost defensive of her dad, not overly defensive, but she'd be like, no guys, it's fine. Like, she would just always say, it's fine, don't worry, that kind of like calming. She never like really defended him and said like, no, my dad's great, but like she was like, she defended the situation. She was like, no guys, you're overreacting kind of thing. So actually, because of this, we really don't know truly how bad things were in that household, because she lets things slip every now and again, but then she kind of like backpedals on it, and we don't know what's true. Eventually, after years and years and years of tension and strict rules and poverty, Nazrin finally turned to her husband Aziz and said, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. She took their 2 kids, Nona and Ali, and they went and got a smaller apartment only about 2 miles away. It was still in Grapevine, but they got a smaller apartment together, and they were just gonna start life over again without Aziz. They knew that they could survive and even thrive without him, so that's their plan. They're just gonna go off and live life by themselves. But Aziz can't handle that. He had nothing outside of this family. He was nothing outside of this family. He was financially dependent on Nazrin. He was emotionally dependent on her for like ego reasons, you know what I mean? Like putting her down and stuff was doing something for him. And other than that, he had no prospects. He had nothing going for him in life. He was nothing without Nazrin. And he knew that. He knew that his life was nothing without her. His life was pretty much over the second she left him because she was his life and he treated her terribly. So she went out to live her own. So when Nazrin and the kids left, Aziz proceeded to do absolutely nothing. Neighbours saw him just like pottering about his house for a while. He didn't really leave at all. Actually, they saw him gardening quite a bit. He seemed to have picked up gardening in his divorcee era. The neighbours actually theorised that he was probably going to try and put the house on the market, you know, try and sell the house, because if he could sell this house and then downsize, get a smaller one for himself, he could then pocket the difference, you know, and he desperately needed money. Months and months went by, and I don't know what was happening in this section of the case. I don't know if Aziz was managing to see or speak to the kids at all, but we do know that it was still very, very turbulent based on some things that Nona said to her friends at school. She said something along the lines of, it's getting harder and harder, or it's becoming more and more difficult. So her friends knew that even though her and her mum and her brother had moved out of that situation, the family dynamic was still not good at all. Like, there was still a lot of tension there somehow. Her friends did try and ask her what she meant, but as always, she didn't really elaborate on that. Just kind of moved past it. That summer went by. Nona graduated high school, started at community college, and things were looking up. Things were looking up for the family. This, like, smaller version of the family now. Everyone was moving on with their lives beyond Aziz. And then Christmas 2011 rolls round, and Nazrin and her two kids decide to throw a Christmas Eve party for all of their family. You know, they've had a really shit year, honestly, and they needed this. They wanted time with their family around the Christmas period. So they invited everyone over to their new apartment. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. This was a big extended family party. It was aunts, uncles, cousins, aunties. I've literally said that twice. There was that many aunties. And I don't know how, but it's believed that Aziz somehow found out that this party was going on without him, and he was fuming. This was his breaking point. This was when he decided to go ahead with what he was about to go ahead with. So the next day, on Christmas morning, just before 11 a.m, Aziz rocks up at Nazrin's apartment, her new apartment, and he is dressed head to toe like Santa. And he's going, hi, I'm here to surprise the kids, Merry Christmas, da da da, acting like this was some like really big, nice, fatherly, happy surprise that he was there. But remember, they all don't like him. He's been awful to them. So Nazrin's like, really? Like, she was not happy that he was there. She did not want him to be there, but also at the same time, it was Christmas, and she was putting her own feelings aside to make things better for her kids. And so she decided to just let Aziz in that day. So he came in, and he came to celebrate Christmas with that side of the family. Nazrin's sister, her husband, and their daughter were all already there at the house. And actually Sarah, Nazrin's niece, text her friends. I think she was in a group chat, or like she was just texting her friends. She texted her friends just as Aziz arrived, saying, so, we're all here, and my uncle is here too, dressed as Santa. It had quite a clear, like, sarcastic tone to it, and you can tell from the next text, because she followed up about 15 minutes later saying, and now he wants to be all fatherly and win Father of the Year. Sarah is 22, by the way, the woman that's sending these texts. She is a fully grown woman. She can see through what Aziz is doing right now. She can sense that his intentions are not pure. They're not to make his kids' Christmas a good one. She can tell that something's going on here. And she was right not to trust him, because 5 minutes after Sarah sent that last text to her friend, police received that 911 call after the shooting had already taken place within 5 minutes. No one knows what happened in that 5-minute space that triggered Aziz to start this, whether there'd been an argument or something was said, we don't know. But things must have really switched in that 5-minute space, because for her to be saying, oh, and now he's trying to be Father of the Year, he must have still been acting really, really nice 5 minutes before he turned on his whole family and shot 6 people to death. Following this case, police went and spoke to a lot of people from Aziz's life. I mean, in the last few years of his life, he'd really secluded himself from everyone else. His whole life was his family. But other people that he'd known here and there, police went and spoke to them, and they were all so shocked to hear this, because it seemed that Aziz... There was 2 different Azizes. There was the horrible one at home that was emotionally abusive to his family, very controlling, very lazy, didn't want to work, didn't want to support the family. But then there was the other Aziz that went out into the world and was confident, intelligent, funny, witty. You know, he had this front that he would put on for everyone else. And whenever they heard that he had committed something like this, they were shocked to their core. He wasn't a violent man. Well, this was what they thought, that he wasn't a violent man. He wasn't even an angry man. A lot of them... So the only thing that a lot of them were aware of was that he was financially dependent on his wife, Nasrin. But that their brains never went to murder from there. You know what I mean? Financial dependence... Just that doesn't connect. That doesn't connect. It's not connecting for me. But yeah, that was kind of the only red flag that they had for Aziz. So it's believed that the main motive for this massacre was jealousy. He was jealous of Nasrin and the kids for moving on, and he was jealous that he'd been pretty much exiled from the family. They were having this massive Christmas party without him. They had invited, welcomed everyone but him. And honestly, I think he just didn't like the fact that Nasrin and the kids were moving on and being happy without him, while he was just struggling. He'd only gotten worse since they'd left, and he didn't want to see them happy without him. But one thing that really plagues my brain about this case, ever since I started researching this one, this just really gets me, and I don't know why, is the fact that he tried to frame Hussein, wiped the gun down, put it in his hand, only then to kill himself in the same room and die with the gun in his hand. So he was the only one, it's obvious that he was the only one that could have framed Hussein like that. I don't know why he bothered. I don't know why he bothered to wipe the gun down and try and frame him if he knew that he was gonna kill himself. Or maybe he didn't know he was gonna kill himself. Maybe that wasn't part of the plan. To be fair, this is a theory that I read, was that he was gonna try and pin it on Hussein and maybe try and run away and get away with it forever, but maybe he killed them all, staged this, the gun in Hussein's hand, and then stepped back and realised what he'd done, that he had just murdered his whole family. The only people that he cares about, even though he has a funny way of showing it, these were the only people that mattered in his life, and he had just gotten rid of all of them, and now he was a murderer that was probably going to get the worst sentence they could possibly hand to him. Maybe it was a combination of, I don't like what I've just done, and I don't want to deal with the consequences of what I've just done. I don't want to go to prison. Can't be arsed with that. And so maybe the easiest option then was to just kill himself. But I just find it quite interesting that he bothered to stage the shooting beforehand. He must have thought he was going to try and get away with it, surely. Unless he was just that dumb and he thought that, I don't know, maybe that I don't know, gang. But that is all I have for this case. A really awful one, I know. And especially these kind of these cases where there's not a resolution at the end, someone gets prison time or something like that, they always feel quite unfinished. So I'm sorry to leave it like that. Although we do know what happened. The crime is fully solved. Thank you again to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. Remember, they're giving you guys 1 month free when you click the link down below in the description. So make sure you go do that. I love Magellan TV. A huge thank you to all of my channel members for supporting the channel and helping me decide the cases that I cover. All of my tier 2 members are on screen right now, so thank you so much. If you want to become a channel member, you can click the join button down below. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up down below. That would really help me out. Merry Christmas, by the way. I think I've actually forgotten to say that for quite a lot of this video. Merry Christmas. Yeah, if you want to subscribe, there's a circle with my face in it right there. You can click that. I upload true crime content all the time. And if you want to watch another one of them, there. I picked you one out special. Click on it. Click on it. Go on. All right. Merry Christmas. Bye.